On April 11, 2012, it was reported the couple's nephew Charles Robert Stevenson was possibly linked to an Indiana woman's death.
Three homicides in 2 states in 1 year may add up to arrests in 2 unsolved murders tonight. A Walton man might be responsible for both crimes, and he's the nephew of 2 of the victims.
9 News reporter Tom McKee is live at the Boone County Sheriff's Office now to put things in perspective. Tom?
Well, Carol, lots of questions tonight. Who killed Leigh Jennings in Aurora last week? Who killed Bill and Peggy Stevenson in Florence last year? Could the same person be responsible for both crimes? Well, that's what investigators here in Boone County want to know, along with their counterparts in Dearborn County over in Indiana.
It was Thursday night when the body of 67-year-old Leigh Jennings was found in her home on Aspen Ridge Drive in Aurora. Police there called it a homicide, and Dearborn County prosecutor Aaron Negengard said she died a violent death. Jennings worked for years at Jim Young's barbershop in Florence and was said to be well liked there. A possible break in the case came Monday night in Walton at a home on Old Stevenson Mill Road. Indiana State Police asked for help from the Boone County Sheriff's Office to investigate the house of a possible suspect.
Part of that puzzle is here in Boone County, and that's how law enforcement agencies work. So if I go into another jurisdiction, I'll at the very least let them know that I'm there, and oftentimes ask for their assistance.
The man reportedly tried to take his own life and is currently hospitalized. What piqued everyone's interest is that he's the nephew of Bill and Peggy Stevenson, whose bodies were found in their Florence home last year. Their children offered a $5,000 reward in the case, but so far there's been no arrest.
Is this person that was hospitalized because of the self-inflicted wounds in Walton, is this a person of interest in the Stevenson case?
I'm not going to comment on the Stevenson case.
Well, Carol, so what tonight that means is 2 families are waiting, and they, like police, want to see arrests and convictions in these cases very, very soon.
Tom McKee reporting live for us. Thanks, Tom. And you can call it intuition. The Stevenson's daughter, Beth Victor, told 9 News in an interview she feared the person responsible for her parents' murder could be someone she knew. 9 News reporter Jay Warren is live in the newsroom with more from Victor, who said her parents didn't have any enemies. Jay?
That's right, Carol. This February, 9 News anchor Julie O'Neill interviewed Beth Victor about the murder of her parents, Victor's parents. The most pressing questions for Victor were who did it and why. Boone County Sheriff's investigators interviewed hundreds of people in 8 states, but were still left without a break in the case. Since the May murders, Beth Victor told 9 News that she and her family were unsure if they were safe and said they lived in fear every day. Victor has been scratching her head because she felt, like her parents, didn't have any enemies.
They had no enemies. Not an enemy in the world.
It has to be the biggest shock.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's never thought it would happen to our family.
Now, Victor says that whenever the family gets together, the murders is all they ever talk about. She and the rest of her family hope that the answers are coming soon. Carol?
Jay Warren, thanks for that.
The nephew of Bill and Peggy, Charles Steve Stevenson, was in jail on a $50,000 cash bond for unrelated crimes at the time of when he was considered a person of interest in the Aurora, Indiana murder of Leigh Jennings and looked at as a possible one in the murders of his auntie and uncle. The motive for Charles Stevenson was speculated to be about money in regards to the murder of Leigh Jennings.
It's possible money might be behind 3 murders in Aurora and Florence in the past year.
That's the picture documents are painting in the case of Charles Robert Stevenson, reportedly a person of interest in both cases. 9 News reporter Tom McKee has the latest. Tom?
Well, Carol, this arrest warrant is what's keeping Stevenson behind bars here at the Boone County Jail on a $50,000 cash bond. It says he was guilty of tampering with evidence and also trafficking in OxyContin. It does not specifically mention the Leigh Jennings murder in Aurora or the murder of his aunt and uncle, Peggy and Bill Stevenson, in Florence a year ago. But what this document says is it's a 2006 probate filing in which he was cut out of a family inheritance of hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the executor was Bill Stevenson, his uncle. Clad in the black and white of a jail inmate, Charles Robert Stevenson had pleas of not guilty entered for him Monday by Boone District Court Judge Michael Collins. Public defender Steve Florian made it clear that his client is broke.
He's indicated he would like it with the fact no significant assets, no money in any bank accounts, no vehicles that he owns. The only income he has is about $600 from a monthly pension from Delta Airlines.
Stevenson has had his financial ups and downs. His ex-wife got their Barnwood Court house in Florence when they divorced in July, value $192,000. He was awarded farm property on Beaver Road in Walton with a value of $300,000. However, records show he sold 16 acres of that to Kelly Fulmer and Francis Wireman in February for $273,000. Then there's the matter of the $3,000 loan Charles Stevenson received last October from his aunt, Faye Starks.
Mr. Stevenson had promised to pay her back for a couple of years. He never did. He refused to make any payments, refused to make any restitution to her whatsoever.
Attorney David Steele represents Starks, the 84-year-old sister of Bill Stevenson, and sued for $3,700 in December to get the money back.
She's an elderly woman. She took it from an IRA account. She incurred $750 in tax penalties, so she wanted that money returned to her.
Steele said some checks bounced, some money orders cleared, and $1,700 is still owed. He said the last payment was made on March 30th, the day after police say Leigh Jennings was murdered in her Aurora home.
I met him in the...
Well, Steele says both he and his client have been questioned by authorities in this case, and that she, Starks, is very devastated by all of this, as you can imagine, Carol.
Can't imagine. Tom McKee reporting live for us. Thanks, Tom.
On the 25th of April 2012, Charles Stevenson was arraigned in Boone Circuit Court on charges of tampering with evidence and trafficking in a controlled substance. He entered a plea of not guilty to the charges. On May 10, 2012, Charles Robert Stevenson was charged with the murder of Leigh Jennings. Leigh Jennings, originally from Florence, Kentucky, worked as a barber at Young's Barbershop and had met Charles, who was better known as Steve, whilst she worked there. On March 29, 2012, Leigh Jennings spent her day meeting her elderly mother, who resided in the apartment next door. She then took her mother to the hospital before returning to meet Charles Stevenson for coffee at her place. Jennings promised her mother she would pick her up later on that day but never showed up. A few days later, on April 5, 2012, Jennings was found beaten to death in her apartment at 107B Aspen Ridge Road in Aurora, Indiana. 67-year-old Leigh Jennings died of a fractured skull caused by blunt force trauma to her head and was found on the floor when authorities arrived. There was a large amount of blood splatter in the kitchen and the dining room. An iron skillet covered in blood was seen hanging on the wall in the kitchen, while the pepper grinder was on the kitchen table. Authorities worked out Charles was the last person to speak to Leigh Jennings on the 29th of March 2012 and concluded she died the same day that Charles met her for coffee at her home. The police believed Charles' motive for her murder was money because he needed to pay his aunt $1,000. He knew Leigh kept large amounts of money in a large safe because she didn't trust banks. Charles' DNA and Leigh's blood was found on the pepper grinder and iron skillet used to murder her. Leigh Jennings' blood was also found in her bedroom safe where she stored her money. Phone records showed texts between Charles and Leigh stopped the day she was murdered, and a Papa John's pizza box was found in the home with both their names on it. The police worked out Charles paid back the $1,000 but did not know exactly how much Charles took from her safe.
Well, the motive was money. The murder, well planned. The weapons, a pepper grinder and an iron skillet. That's why Dearborn County authorities charged Charles Stevenson today with murdering and robbing Leigh Jennings in Aurora. 9 News reporter Tom McKee is live to break down the evidence against Stevenson. Tom?
Well, Tanya, Stevenson is in the Boone County Jail right now, still charged with evidence tampering and with drug trafficking. However, because of what's in this detailed affidavit, he's now accused of murdering Leigh Jennings for money, and if he's convicted, he could be sentenced to death. When Leigh Jennings was found dead inside her Aurora home, police said she'd sustained multiple skull fractures. Later, they said that Charles Steve Stevenson was the last person to see her alive on Thursday, March 29th, the day she died. Prosecutors said today that she'd been beaten with a cast iron skillet and a very large pepper grinder.
That probable cause affidavit indicates that Charles Stevenson's DNA was on the pepper grinder, and he could not be excluded as a mixture with Leigh Jennings on the handle of the skillet.
Dearborn County Prosecutor Aaron Negengard and Aurora Police Chief Brian Fields said that Jennings kept large amounts of money in a home safe because she didn't trust banks. They said Stevenson knew this and robbed her because he was desperate to repay a debt to a family member to avoid going to jail.
Mr. Stevenson needed to pay an aunt who he had borrowed money from $1,000 on Friday, March 30th. The investigation determined that he did not have that money on Wednesday.
Stevenson also borrowed money 2 other times from Jennings and left IOUs in the safe.
I hope it never happens to another family, not in Aurora, not in Lawrenceburg, Greendale, or any other community. But I know that if it does happen again, I know that we're going to get the same response.
As a family, we only seek justice for my mom, Leigh Jennings, who we miss very dearly. And at this time, we're comfortable in allowing the legal process to begin, and we'll see what the results come beyond that.
Now, Ryan Seavey said he doesn't think his family is going to recover from this for a very long time, and of course that's very understandable. Coming up at 6, neighbors of Leigh Jennings react to the arrest, and they're very glad about it. Tom McKee, 9 News in Burlington. Back to you, Tanya.
On May 11, 2012, a friend of Leigh Jennings spoke to a news reporter about Leigh and her murder.
Friends of an Aurora woman found murdered in her home say they are outraged after hearing how their close friend was killed. The details emerged today, with prosecutors saying 67-year-old Leigh Jennings died from blunt force trauma after being hit repeatedly with a pepper grinder and an iron skillet. 9 News reporter Bill Price is live in Boone County, where the man charged with Jennings' murder is in jail. Bill?
Well, Julie, 58-year-old Charles Steve Stevenson is here at the Boone County Jail tonight, facing evidence tampering as well as separate drug charges. Now, over in Indiana, he's now facing murder and robbery charges in Leigh Jennings' death.
It was a total shock.
Close friends of Jennings say they weren't ready today to hear the grisly details of how their close friend died. One of those friends, Laura Lesko, says she learned the details when she watched the Dearborn County Prosecutor's live news conference this afternoon.
It's really hard to see that my friend has been killed with a peppercorn shaker and a skillet. And what was my reaction was, my reaction is I'm glad that he's been charged.
Lesko says she knew Leigh Jennings through a positive spiritual circle of friends who talked or met each other almost every day. After Jennings was found murdered, that's when Lesko and the friends started piecing information together.
I went in and I discovered that basically that his name was Steve, and then I seen on Facebook and he was in Kentucky, and it just kind of made sense to me. And so then that evening we told it to the detectives, and it went from there.
Lesko says she and her friends are still in much pain over Jennings' murder. She doesn't know she'll ever have the strength to forgive the man who's been charged with killing her friend. Should he ask for the death penalty?
Yes, he should. If that prosecutor had someone who he loved dearly and knew that someone is guilty for sure, and that you know for sure that someone's guilty, then he should.
Now, Lesko also says that once Stevenson is brought back to Indiana to face the murder and robbery charges, she hopes to be in the courtroom just about every day to watch the proceedings. She says that she and her friends want to be in that courtroom as witnesses for Leigh Jennings.
On May 16, 2012, Charles Robert Stevenson was extradited to Indiana.
Charles Stevenson will be headed to Indiana this afternoon to face charges he murdered and robbed an Aurora woman. That ruling came this morning in Boone Circuit Court. 9 News reporter Tom McKee is covering Northern Kentucky news now. He's live with what's next for this Walton man. Tom?
Well, Tanya, Charles Stevenson is currently here in the Boone County Jail on charges of evidence tampering and drug trafficking, but not for long. He's going to be taken to the Dearborn County Jail in Lawrenceburg this afternoon to await trial for allegedly killing Leigh Jennings. Now, this morning, this was supposed to be Stevenson's pretrial hearing on the tampering and trafficking charges in the courtroom of Boone Circuit Judge James Schran. However, since he was accused of murdering Jennings with a pepper grinder and a frying pan, the case is now headed in an entirely different direction.
Your Honor, basically circumstances have changed since we were here last time. He's now been formally charged in Indiana, and what he wants to do is go address those charges first. So I think all parties are in agreement that he is to be released on this case so he can go address those charges over there.
We would ask that our bond be amended for the purpose of allowing him to be released to the detainer that Indiana has, but we've also agreed to substitute our bond with the original amount of the warrant after he's taken back to Indiana to be used as a holder for when he's finished with the charges there in Indiana.
Now, the Kentucky charges, again, have not been dismissed. They've simply been put on hold until the Indiana case is completed. An August 29th conference has been set to see where things stand at that time. And Tanya, I just spoke with Dearborn County Prosecutor Aaron Negengard. He said after the transfer takes place, it's very likely that Stevenson could be arraigned on the Indiana charges tomorrow in a Dearborn County court there in Lawrenceburg. Tom McKee, 9 News, live in Burlington.
Thanks, Tom.
On Thursday, August 30, 2012, the Boone County Sheriff's Office held a press conference and discussed the DNA they acquired from the crime scene and information regarding the investigation. Spokesman Tom Sheben also stated Charles Stevenson's DNA was not a match. On the same day, it was revealed how investigators worked out the time of death for at least one of the victims because of a medical device that had been implanted in one of them. This may have been a pacemaker, defibrillator, or some other medical device capable of recording time. The autopsy revealed Bill and Peggy died between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. on the morning of the 29th of May 2011. It was also revealed the killer or killers of the Stevensons rearranged the crime scene in a unique way. The reward was also increased from $5,000 to $100,000.
Good morning. We stand before you today in disbelief that it has been 15 months since our lives were changed in an instant when our parents, two of the most loving and caring people God ever created, were brutally and senselessly murdered. Tom, Beth, and I lost the most wonderful parents anyone could ever hope to have. Our children lost their mama and papa who loved each of them with all their hearts. There is not a minute that goes by that we're not brokenhearted and miss them beyond description. The person responsible for their murders has lived in the shadows, hiding for the past 15 months. They believe they have succeeded in getting away with murder. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Because of the meticulous work of the Boone County Sheriff's Department and the experts at the Kentucky Crime Lab, we now know who you are genetically, and it's just a matter of time until we find you. The pain and heartache you have caused our family cannot be measured. Because of our undying love for our parents, we are stronger and more united than ever. We will never stop looking for you. One day, we will stand face to face in a courtroom, and you will face justice for the despicable, cowardly act you committed against our family. We would like to thank the Boone County Sheriff's Department, the Boone County Commonwealth Attorney's Office, the Kentucky Crime Lab, and the FBI. All have worked endless hours to help solve this extremely complex and difficult case. We pray daily for them to receive God's strength and guidance as this case moves forward. Thanks to the generosity of family and friends, Today we would like to announce that a reward of $100,000 is being offered by our family for information leading to an arrest. However, this is not an open-ended reward and will expire in 90 days on November the 30th, 2012. The number to call if you have information or would like to leave a tip is 859-334-8496. 859-334-8496. In conjunction with the reward, we will be hanging several large banners along I-75 in Boone County. Once they are up, Tom Shaven will notify you of their locations. We thank all those who have lifted up our family in prayer, and we ask that you continue to do so until justice has been served. Thank you.
As you just heard from Doug, during the commission of the murders, the killer left his DNA in separate locations inside the home here. We owe a special thanks to the Kentucky State Police lab technicians who found that proverbial needles in a haystack for us. And while I cannot elaborate further on how it was found or where it was located or what type of DNA it is, I can tell you that it was where it was discovered, it could only come from one person, and that person is the murderer. That DNA profile has been entered into the Combined DNA Index System, otherwise known as CODIS. It's with the FBI. While there have been no matches yet, these DNA profiles are continually being compared. Additionally, we're releasing a narrowed down timeline of when these murders happen, and that's between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m., again on Sunday, May 29, 2011, right here. Through witness accounts and medical documentation, we actually have a precise time of when it happened. We're opting to withhold that right now in interest of the investigation. We know someone spent a considerable amount of time in that home after the deaths, arranging the crime scene in such a manner it can only be is unique. That's the only way we could describe it, unique. While I cannot be more specific concerning the aforementioned, I want to impress upon the Boone County community, our stakeholders, that we are conducting a painstaking investigation and we continue to narrow our scope. To the murderer, I say, we now have your genetic profile. This is an identification that you can't alter or change, and it is by far the best evidence that we could ever hope to have at this point. With the announcement of the substantial increase in the reward from the Stevensons, as Doug told you, we've set up a dedicated phone line, again 859-334-8496, and created a page on our website, www.boonecountyky.org/SO, for those interested in following the case and providing tips. Our goal today, between the increase and the reward and the banners and the information we're sharing with you today, is we're hoping to jar somebody's memory. We're hoping that you remember back and something about what somebody said was suspicious, that they couldn't account for their time, that maybe they were injured. Maybe that's how the DNA was left. Maybe it was a nick or a cut. Maybe it was a scratch. We're looking for the public's help in catching a killer and putting him behind bars and giving these people right here some relief. Questions?
Have you checked with the local hospitals to find out if the DNA could possibly be a match or anything to any particular person, if you think maybe he got cut or injured?
No, not to my knowledge, we haven't.
Have you solicited DNA from anybody in the course of the investigation?
We have.
Has anybody denied the request for DNA?
Not to my knowledge.
So those submissions do not match the killer?
Correct.
The FBI given any indication that they've found that DNA at other crime scenes?
No, just the opposite, as a matter of fact. There have been no matches thus far.
You say you've entered it into the FBI system. Did that just happen, or you did it and they've checked and have come up with nothing yet?
It's happened, they've checked, and we've come up with nothing yet, correct.
Have you checked the DNA of Charles Robert Stevenson?
We have.
Does that match with the DNA that you found?
Obviously, no.
Is he no longer a suspect then?
I don't know. We never did identify him as a suspect. Anything else?
Can you say now he's not a suspect?
I can tell you that's not his DNA.
Can you give us the locations of where the banners will be on I-75?
As soon as they provide them to me, I'll provide them to you.
Will we see the banner today?
There's a good chance. I know that that's in the works.
Is there any possibility of going back to some of the people you interviewed previously and getting their DNA, or is that probably a constitutional violation or something?
It wouldn't be a constitutional violation if they willingly gave it to us. Let's just suppose that's already happened.
You've already gone back to those people that you previously interviewed as people of interest and checked their DNA?
Or in the course of the investigation, gotten it when we interviewed them.
So they've been ruled out as well, all the people, persons of interest, quote unquote, previously?
No, I'm not saying that, because we continue to send evidence to the lab of evidence that we collected at the crime scene. Consider this, I guess, if you will. There's a bunch of evidence at the crime scene. We send down what between our detectives and their lab techs, what we think might have the best chance of getting evidence. And once they either get evidence or rule it out, then we send more. So we're still in the process of sending more and comparing more.
Is there any indication more than one person was involved in this crime?
No, but I'll tell you this, we're not sold that there wasn't.
When you say this scene is unique, I know you can't elaborate on it either. Can you elaborate it a little bit more as far as unique? Maybe that triggers somebody's memory around here. I mean, did the guy remove anything, take it outside or anything like that somebody perhaps around here might have seen?
You know, I'd love to elaborate on that, but there are certain things that we've decided, and we've discussed it at length, that we just cannot tell, because he knows this and we know this, and it's not going to behoove us for the community to know this, and we hope that they understand that, and we trust that they do.
Can you say anything more? You said it happens between 1 and 4 a.m. Can you say anything more about how the suspect got in and what the scenario was surrounding how he got access to that house?
No.
Was there any indication? Mr. Stevenson he had a long range. He visited folks all over the country and we came in contact with people from all over the country at the truck stop and everywhere. Is there any indication of where this person might be at all, whether they might be a local person, someone from out of state? Is there anything you can tell us about that?
Brian, I think you just answered your own question. We've been in how many states?
We've been in 14 states.
14 states.
More than 250 people.
And interviewed more than 250 people. Yes, his work was far-reached.
No sense of a motive at this point?
No.
Are you any closer to making an arrest today than you were in May of last year?
Yes and no. Yes, in that we know who this person is genetically, and it's a matter of time. We're comfortable with that, but no, as far as actually pointing a finger and saying it's Joe Webb.
I know this is emotional for the lead detectives who've been on this for so long. I wonder, when was it that moment came you realized you had a match or a genetic profile, and what the reaction was from the detectives?
Coy?
And Detective Matt Mullins is also the lead on this case and has done the lion's share of the work, a lot of the heavy lifting. And I can tell you, he called me to let me know that happened, and he was ecstatic. It's not a matter of if and when anymore. It's a matter of when. We now have his genetic identification, and what that means is In a lot of cases, as a detective, you may know who did a crime, but never be able to prove it. We have something much better than that now. We can prove who did our crime. It's just a matter of when we put his name on a warrant and we arrest him, and that will happen. The commitment of the sheriff, the Commonwealth Attorney, the lab, the detectives that aren't here today that are out working on things that have to do with this case as well, the deputies that you see sitting around, everyone is more committed at this moment than they were the week after it happened. And it's very comforting for us to know that we're working with those group of people who are committed and are going forward, and we will put that name on that warrant, and this person will be caught and they will be arrested.
But what if this person, this is the only crime they've ever committed, there's no DNA match in the system or ever will be?
One of the things that Mr. Shaben stayed away from is the fact that there are other databases. There's other places where DNA is kept, and we're not going to discuss that, but there are offline searches that will occur and have been occurring and will continue to occur. So this individual has to be careful not to make any mistakes in a lot of different areas, not just in the fact that he may be arrested for a crime that gets him put into the system somewhere in the penal system, but he can't make any mistakes to where his DNA would come up to any place where it would be compared to this system. But those are offline searches, and those go along with the normal searches that are being done each and every day with the CODIS system that Mr. Shaben had mentioned to you.
Obviously,
full name for us so that we have it, please?
Yes, ma'am. It's C-O-Y, and the last name is C-O-X. And Detective Mullins is M-A-T-T, that's Matt, obviously, and Mullins is M-U-L-L-I-N-S.
Coy, you keep referring to this DNA match as him. Can you say for a fact that it is a male?
Please,
The DNA would
please
tell you
quote me on this. That was a gender mistake. I should not have made it gender specific. This person, we are keeping that open. This person.
The DNA would tell you if it's a man or a woman. It would also tell you if they were a Caucasian or an African American. Can you share any of that information with us that might help somebody who might have seen something around here?
I cannot, nor can I confirm that what you said was true, that it can be confirmed with gender.
How about just plain old simple fingerprints? Were there none inside?
We are not going to make comments about fingerprints. I think Deputy Shaben has said it best. There was a lot of evidence inside this site, and that has been collected, but we're not going to make specific comments on that.
You say that if he makes any mistake, not just with the penal system or anything like that, that you're going to catch him. You got to be concerned in the back of your mind that he doesn't make any more mistakes, or he or she.
Well, some of the offline stuff that's going on right now, we feel really good about that. We feel confident about that. I don't believe that and I don't know if you've noticed, but I hope that you do, the family behind us has worked probably harder than any detective. They're praying for us every day, without a doubt. There are hundreds of people that when he and I wake up, and the other deputies and detectives on this department, they're praying for him every day. I wouldn't want to be this person, because I just don't think that's going to happen. Is it possible? Anything's possible.
Do you have enough evidence that when you get a DNA match, you can make an arrest?
Yes, sir.
Aside from the DNA, has there been any matches to any similar crime scenes? You said it was very unique. Has the FBI matched it to any other unsolved crimes?
We can't comment too far on that, other than to say that part of our trips out of state had to do with just that situation. And don't take that any further than what I just said.
Meaning what?
Meaning don't take that any further than what I just said.
Were you the lead detective on the Michelle Mockfield case?
I was not, no sir.
On November 16, 2012, it was reported 2 of the lead detectives in the case recently traveled to Philadelphia to present the case to the Vidocq Society, a group of 82 professional members who bring a broad array of forensic and other experience to assist in cold case investigations. On November 20, 2012, information was released on the reward and that the $100,000 reward would expire on November 29, 2012. On Tuesday, May 21, 2013, A jury found Charles Robert Stevenson guilty of murdering 67-year-old Leigh Jennings on March 29, 2012, and on the charge of robbery. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
Do you want to say anything to Leigh's family or your family?
On Monday, July 2, 2013, 59-year-old Charles Robert Stevenson from Walton, Kentucky, learned in court of his sentencing verdict. Afterwards, he was then transported to Indiana State Prison to start his sentence. Charles Stevenson's lawyer stated he planned to file an appeal.
There's raw emotion in a Dearborn County courtroom today as friends and family lash out at the man convicted of killing an Aurora mother and grandmother. 9 on Your Side reporter Shannon Kettler just got back. She joins us now with what they had to say. Shannon.
Well, Tanya, those who loved Leigh Jennings did not hold back as they took the stand to give their victim impact statements before the court. As you can imagine, there were tears and a lot of anger expressed towards the man who murdered Jennings. Prosecutors say Charles Stevenson used a large pepper grinder and an iron skillet to kill the 67-year-old last March at her home on Aspen Ridge Drive in Aurora. Police say Stevenson stole $1,000 from Jennings to repay a debt to a family member. In May, a jury found him guilty of murder and robbery, and today the judge sentenced Stevenson to life in prison without parole. Jennings' 2 sons, her granddaughter, and 2 close friends took the stand and expressed how they felt about the convicted killer and also how Jennings' death has impacted so many people in the community.
My main intent was to let him know that it's not just this one person that was impacted. He's impacted his whole family, his family, my family, friends. It reaches so far, it's almost unimaginable.
Now, Stevenson did not make a statement and instead sat in his chair showing no emotion throughout this hearing. A detective tells me it's the same look he's had on his face since the first day they met him. Stevenson's attorney tells me, meanwhile, he plans to file an appeal.